You're listening to Al Pastor, the show that helps you love God, love your neighbor, and eat more tacos. I'm your host, Pastor Brian. Welcome to the show. Hello, I want to welcome you to episode 21.
21?
It is 21, so I think it's obvious you're joining me today. You didn't even say hello.
Hello, but by now they all know me.
Well, yeah, of course. So today's 21. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's a cool thing.
Well, for me, 21 is kind of a significant number because statistics show that if you do something 21 times, the odds of making it a habit are really, really good. So this is kind of a milestone for me.
Yeah.
And I enjoy doing this as well.
Yes, I can tell.
So I want to open up. We're not going to talk about tacos, by the way. So if you came here for the taco talk, well, I'm waiting until we get some other folks on the podcast, which, by the way, is going to be very soon. We're going to have some guests and really kind of get this thing going.
Cool.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to cover our reading, which is Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 11. So, Marcia, we can't cover all of this, obviously. Yeah. But that really kind of also goes into the intention of the podcast. It's different than Bible study. Mm-hmm. And I hope that that's abundantly clear. Like, this is not what we do on Wednesdays. Wednesdays, we really kind of dive into the text.
Yeah.
And this is the intention behind this is just to kind of come alongside and help for those that want help or maybe
just little nuggets.
Yeah, just to kind of get you going. So let's go into it. I can't promise we're only going to cover verse 1, but we'll see. So let me go ahead and read it. And of course, most of you know I like the New King James. So it says, "Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us." Now, Marcia, I'm kind of assuming here that the context is abundantly clear. Do you think it is?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the therefore is obviously like all throughout chapter 11. Mm-hmm. We've been reading about the heroes of the faith. So the author's like saying, like if someone was going to ask, okay, you've just mentioned all of these people, what do we do with them? Well, he's about to tell you. So this cloud of witnesses
is
them, everybody from the hall of faith. So I do want to touch on this idea of witnesses here. It does paint a picture. If you're kind of a visual person, like if you were in an amphitheater or if you were in a stadium and you had all these people up in the stands watching you, that's part of it. But if that's where we stopped, we could get in trouble because it's so much more. In the Bible, in the New Testament, a witness is not just like a passive spectator, but an active participant. And a witness is a person that confirms and attests to the truth as a confessing witness. Mm-hmm. So let's look at it like this. Like if you were going to go to the court.
Yeah. Jury duty.
And well, not jury duty. You wouldn't be a witness if you're a juror. But let's just say you were going to testify on behalf, or they were going to call to the stand a witness, right? You would have to confirm and attest to what you saw under oath, right? So we'd say, do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God, and that whole thing. But the Bible also takes it another step further because the word witness is the word that we get martyr. That's the actual word, martyr. So it's so strong that it involves somebody that's cheering you on, somebody that confirms and attests to the truth, but it's also, a witness is also a person that would be willing to lay down their life to the point of death as a result, martyr. And I think that is abundantly clear with everything that we've been reading in chapter 11, because a lot of those folks were martyred for their faith. We just read, sawn in half, gave up their lives. Not all of them, but some of them. So that's the first thing about witness. And then I also want us to notice that he The author is likening our Christian walk to a race. It's to a race. And for the original audience, this was something that was very, very familiar to them. So it evoked thoughts of something that was to be taken very seriously, like an exertion, a tense exertion, maximum effort. And it would constantly have a need of your energy and focus if you were in a race so that you could obtain the goal. Now, we, by implication, are called to participate in an athletic contest. And to do that, we need to do whatever's necessary in order for us to compete for this event. But the question is, what's the event? The event is to get across the finish line, isn't it?
Get to heaven.
Exactly. To hear those words, well done, good and faithful servant.
And I like the word endurance in there because it doesn't matter. And in this race, it doesn't matter if you're going to get there first, second, third, Well, as long as you get there.
Yeah. Well, just like with any kind of metaphor, there are limits to that.
Yeah.
So he's not calling us to win in the sense of getting first place. It is to complete the race.
Complete the race.
And since you're the one that brought up endurance, which I'm glad that you did, for those of you at home and that are reading, please notice that in verse 1, we have the word endurance. Verse 2, we have Jesus who endured the cross. Verse 3, we have the word endured. So I would recommend that if you highlight, underline, you have all three of those that kind of call to your attention. We have a threefold exhortation to endure, and this is what it's all about. This is what we're going to be talking about. So let's talk specifically about the race that's here, because we need to talk about what kind of race this was. And then how do we know what kind of race it was? Well, this is actually a reference to what's called a foot race. And this was one of 5 contests that were in something that's called the pentathlon in the games all throughout the Roman Empire. Now, at the Olympic Games, the foot race was the only contest that went on for an extended period of time. And so what a foot race is not a sprint, it is a marathon. That's the difference. Big difference between the two. So when he exhorts us to run with endurance, it is not a contest of speed, but of stamina. So notice also what he tells us to do. He says to lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily distracts us. We're going to talk about the sin here in just a moment, but hide your kids, hide your wife, because we're going to get a little graphic here for the next couple of moments. Nothing too bad. It's not, crazy PG, but here is, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Laying aside every weight. Here would be the usual preparation for the race. Contestants would remove all their clothes. So they would run nude. So you would have to remove everything before you could race so that nothing got in the way, which seems counterproductive to me because I'm like, that's just crazy. Anyway, we won't take that there. But the most natural imagery here would be like a long, heavy robe or a tunic, which obviously you're not going to run in that. But it also could be very literal here. It's most likely dual purpose. Literally your clothing, and 2, if you had any excess weight on you, you would need to start doing keto or whatever it is to get that weight off so you could compete.
Why are you getting so personal now?
I'm not gay. Well, I wasn't sure if we were going to get into like couples therapy or what, but
no, I think we need it.
You want to talk about losing weight? You have something to sell me?
Come on, keep going. Keep going. Focus.
All right, so here's the imagery of laying aside, and so by analogy, for us, anything that would interfere. Okay, let's just really bring this home. Anything that would interfere with us being completing our responsible commitment to Jesus could be part of what this shedding away is. One commentator, I'm going to read just a little reference here. It says, this might have a reference to the love of wealth, attachment to the world, a preoccupation with earthly interests, or self-importance. Christians are to divest themselves of every association or concern that would limit their freedom for Christian confession. So we're going to get into that here in just a second with the sin. But let's go over the phrase. We did touch a little bit on endurance, but this also tells us that this is something that's involved with a mature commitment to discipleship. And so we have got to be resolved not to get out of the contest, but to make every effort to finish that finish line, regardless of any hardships, exhaustion, pain. And we've talked about it. You were on the podcast before when we was like, hey, this life, we're not promised everything that's good. Mm-hmm. So let's talk for a moment about the sin. Now, if you remember when we were in Hebrews 10:26, there's an episode that's called Willful Sin. That was a reference to one single sin. Do you remember what it was? It was apostasy. That was the sin. Is that what this is talking about? The answer to that is no. This is not the willful sin in which there is no longer a sacrifice that remains for you. This is very general, what we would call. This would be a sin that leads to apostasy. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Now, I know that when we talk about sin, sometimes we tend to focus like on habits and hurts and hang-ups.
Especially because I don't think like someone that once believed in God and believed in his goodness will just wake up one day like, committing apostasy. I think it's a gradual thing. This is how it starts.
Exactly. And this is what he's talking about. So it's not necessarily like, somebody that just falls. It can include falling into sin. But this sin is actually the sin of becoming lukewarm. It's the sin of becoming indifferent. It's the sin of apathy. This is what it's about. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to ask you, define that. Well, put that into
I can define it all day long, but it really has got to come from the Lord speaking to a person's heart. I believe for the majority, and I'm not going to sit here and say, well, everybody's backslidden on their way to hell. No, but I've said this before. I'm very, very concerned for our culture and our world. And let me read you one definition of sin from one commentator. He says, the pastor is, however, particularly concerned with the sin of acquiescence to the discouragement that comes from unbelieving society's hostility and or the pursuit of advantages the unbelieving world offers to those who conform. Such acts betray a distrust of God's power and promises that may cause one to abandon the race and thus fall into apostasy. The pastor wants his hearers to dispense with absolutely anything that will distract them from successfully running the race of faith.
And here where it comes like, this is a personal thing. You have to recognize and pinpoint what is going to distract you from successfully running the race.
Correct.
Because what could be distracting to you is not to me. So,
well, I think that the biggest distraction is time. That's me. I think we give very little time, priority, passion to Jesus. Mm-hmm. I think it's absolutely insane, and I'm just confessing here that me as a pastor, I have to cheerlead to get people to read their Bibles, to say, hey, can you give 10 minutes to God? Like, it's almost embarrassing. Mm-hmm. I'm not kidding you. It's almost embarrassing. Like, should not even be. This should be normal. Like, what do you mean? Mm-hmm. And I've said this in a variety of ways, in various ways. That's how the author of Hebrews opens up Hebrews 1:1. But what this is when we look at this in context, the people have become dull of hearing. We've already read that, right?
Yes.
In other words, they regressed in their biblical literacy to the point that they needed to go back and do the elementary principles over again, right? Mm-hmm. They got to a point where they are neglecting the assembling of themselves together, right? Yes. So look what he's telling them now. He's saying, I just gave you an example of all these people who ran the race. They didn't even get the promise because the promise wasn't there. But now we have the promise. Mm-hmm. It's Jesus. Mm-hmm. And now he's saying, lay this aside. So there's 3 areas of this sin. The first one would be, I said this in Bible study, moonlighting with Judaism. So you got one foot in the church, one foot into the old covenant system. The second one would come from the Roman world, cares of this world, your business, your job, your work, your extracurricular activities are coming before God. So I'm going to say something really bold here. Mm-hmm. For the Hebrews, them neglecting the assembly was a daily thing, like neglecting the assembling of themselves together. They got together every day. There are many indications of that. So they had church services every day. Mm-hmm. We're at the point where it's like, if you come 4 Sundays, like if you showed up for the whole month, it's like, woo, where's my little applause button, right? Hey, you did it. You came to church. You didn't, right? Yeah. Am I taking this too far?
No, it's comical, but it's sad. Yeah.
But this is what I'm saying. So you're asking, what does this look like? The commitment and the endurance? I think that it is a life that is fully devoted to Jesus Christ, that the heart is naturally inclined to the things of God so much that the things of this world fade away. To where it's second nature. It's like, well, what do you mean? Why would I do that? Why would I go there? Why would I invest my time in this?
Yeah, I love the analogy. I really do, that it's so relatable to us in any time of, I don't know, human history. We can relate to endurance. It could be, like anything in our lives. We have to persist. We have to keep going. Mm-hmm. And even if we are, I don't know, running on the treadmill or trying to, or jogging or just walking, you start getting tired. If you stop, what's going to happen? Your body, it starts to mm-hmm. cool off, and you just don't want to do it.
That's why I don't stop. I keep
really.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're a beast on that treadmill. So anyway, it's just keep going, no mm-hmm. matter what. Keep going. Moving slowly is better than not moving at all.
Yes. So I think I don't want to drag this out, and I don't think we will, but I think there's something else that's important to identify is that once we know that we're in the race, right? Because I think people have a tendency to see short term. And so when the author is using the analogy of this foot race, a marathon, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, I need to have long vision. I've become distracted and discouraged with short-term things. Like that old saying, why do you give up tomorrow to live for today? But when you have the vision for your whole life, especially mm-hmm. with your eyes fixed on Jesus, it's going to make a big difference. And then the call is to lay aside every weight now. Not tomorrow, not next week, not in fact, Pastor Yuri, I still remember, he talked about a season. Sometimes parents will come to him and they'll just say, Pastor, because he said this in a sermon, we're going to be gone for a season. You'll still mm-hmm. see us here and there on a Wednesday, but we're, traveling mm-hmm. and we've got sports, and this is just for a season. Mm-hmm. And he says most of the time those seasons end up they last years. As some of the most formidable years of a person's life. So the call here is to identify now and to be proactive and to mm-hmm. say, okay, let me shed all this weight off. Mm-hmm. So we've got this analogy, and then when we get into verse 4, I will point this out. We go from a foot race into a boxing match, because in verse 4, this striving against sin is actually a boxing term. Interesting.
I did not know that.
So you need to fight against sin. I should have played the Rocky theme song for the intro today, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is good stuff. I mean, this is a very, very big deal. And I hope we today include ourselves in the we's here. Verse 1, therefore we, that's me, you, every one of us, since we are surrounded, I hope we'll lay aside whatever it is and go after Jesus.
Amen.
More so than anything else. You have anything you want to say in closing?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes.
No pushback. No,
not today.
Don't be crazy. None of that.
Not today.
Well, you didn't even reveal anything that I didn't know about you. We didn't have it.
True. It's a chill day, I guess.
Well, all right, friends. Well, we'll see you on the next episode. And before I close, Marcia, will you join me for the next podcast?
Do I have to give you an answer right now? I will.
Wow.
Of course I will.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you for listening to Al Pastor with Brian Overturf. If you found value in this, please subscribe and get updates. Most places podcasts are available. We're right here on Anchor FM through Spotify, also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. I hope you'll tune in for the next episode. Until then, we'll see you later.